think coming into spring, I'm saying perhaps going under the radar in that regards. However, you know, you don't know what you have. So on paper, you look, oh, the Rockies have a young rotation. No one knows these names besides Kyle Kendrick. Like, you know, why would we pay attention to that? Well, again, that might be a huge asset for you as the season goes on, because it might end up being that you have all these ace up your sleeves, you know, so to speak. And, you know, I think the Eddie Butler, John Gray thing, how many years have we been talking about them? I think everyone's ready to see them.
All right, let me ask you that.
Yeah.
On that note. So if De La Rosa isn't ready for the regular season,
Sure.
and it looks like he probably won't be, Chacina's gone. What's your rotation right now?
Right.
What do you think the rotation should be? You've been down there a couple of times now. You've watched these guys.
You know, in my mind, knowing that Walt likes the right-left combo going back and forth, I really think it sets up with Kyle Kendrick as your opening day starter, which they've already announced, Tyler Matzik, Jordan Lyles. So that leaves, you know, 2 open spots. They don't have to fill that 5th spot until the 14th of April. So that gives you 2 series to kind of play with 4 starters. I don't know if it's Eddie Butler. You know, from what he's shown at camp, from what I've heard, the buzz about him, his stuff is the best stuff at Rockies camp. But what we've always said is the negative on him is his maturity.
Yes.
And that has been something that is such a buzz and what's been talked about. I've heard it from guys on the coaching staff. I've heard it from players. There's a different air about him this year. You could tell last year there was something about him that wasn't ready to be in a big league clubhouse. You know that.
He was goo-goo-eyed.
You know,
you
and
could see it the way he bounced around the dugout.
And there's something, you know, it's okay to bounce around and be excitable. That's what Nolan Arenado is on the baseball field. But there's a way you go about your business at that level. As you know, with any sport, the NFL, NBA, there's just a different, you know, demeanor you have to have. He didn't have it yet.
Preparation.
He didn't have it yet. And he has it this year.
You were pointing to it, though, is that we've been hearing about them. And Eddie had a brief appearance and got hurt.
Yep.
And then his confidence was shaken. And
not his best stuff for his first go.
You have 2 guys, though, that pitched college baseball. So they're not, you know, off the farm in Iowa and 18 years old. So in the case of Gray, I said yesterday, he's played a lot of important games in the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. So they're not novices here. And I did like Eddie Butler's attitude last year when I would talk to him. I really enjoyed his freshness of telling me that, you know, if he weren't pitching, he'd be racing monster trucks. And his background about pitching on the ranch that they have in Virginia. I loved both. I thought John Gray was more of the serious guy. Eddie Butler was more of the... He reminded me of Ron Howard. You're not old enough again. But
yes,
Ron
I am.
When Ron Howard was on Happy Days, Eddie Butler reminded me of whatever his name was. What was his name?
Richie Cunningham.
Richie Cunningham.
He's a Richie Cunningham. He has that build almost. But I nicknamed him Fast Eddie Butler because he can reach the mid-90s.
Right.
And Fast Eddie was Paul Newman in The Hustler. And I see him as a hustler kind of guy, keeping the ball down and with his speed. And Gray, we know, is a hard thrower.
Right.
And I really think I've maintained over the years that the solution here is fastball pitchers, because the more strikeouts you get, the more chances you prevent of balls falling in the gap and hitting home runs. That if you got a guy that can strike out 8 people, that's 1/4 of the number of outs you need. And they haven't had strikeout guys. I guess the last one would have been Pedro Astacio, that I thought was a strikeout kind of guy.
I think a lot has to do with what O'Dowd wanted on the mound. Mm-hmm. He wanted sinker ball pitchers.
Right.
He wanted guys that beat the ball into the ground, not necessarily.
But also pitch to contact. And I don't think this is. I think that pitch to contact works on the road. And I wrote again, and I would ask you, because you see most all of the road games too. I think you've got to change your philosophy on the road. And I mean that you at home you can go for the big inning. On the road, you've got to play in San Diego and in San Francisco.
Small ball.
You're talking offense-wise? Yeah. I think the philosophy is a little different this year in regards to how to fix those splits. It's no secret in the history of this franchise. It's always been a huge, huge change between home and road. I think they're going to have to play more team offense. They're not necessarily calling it small ball, but really team, making those sacrifice hits, not literal sacrifice hits, but sacrifice hits to try and get some runners in and try and do it early, because the longer you wait on the road, the harder it gets. But really quick, going back to your pitching, because I think this is an interesting point as well. Walt says it's going to take not just a 25-man roster, a 40-man roster. And it's no secret, you're going to have injuries. That happens in baseball. So you don't want to have the ridiculous amount of starters that this team had to show last year, but you're not going to just have 5 starters for the entire season. So I think you're going to see some of these young guys early who ends up sticking through, who ends up leaving when De La Rosa's back, who knows.